Hey everyone, Michelle here and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my May TBR. Now, when it comes to May, I'm being a little bit lazy, but for a good reason. So May's theme is sequels. Again. The reason it's sequels again, I have so many series to finish that it kind of made sense just to have 2 months of sequels. Simple but lazy, but I'm going with it. So this month there is one less book than last month, which means I have 10 books to read. So with these 10 books, like normal, I will go through the 2 readathon books that I will be reading and then on to my other TBR books. Like last month, I will just read you the blurb for the first book, apart from one of them where it is the 3rd book in a series, but it's a series that you can read alone and actually doesn't spoil anything for the past 2 books. And another book is book 5 in a series, but again you can read it as a standalone, so spoils nothing for the books before it. I've been filming for 4 minutes. Somehow there'll be a lot of cuts, I apologise. So let's get straight into the books. So for the buzzwordathon, the buzzword for May is home or house, and for that book I will be reading The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. Let me make sure I've got the book in frame. Excellent. So I only hauled this a couple of months ago and I was thinking I would save this book for July or August when I'm just mood reading, or maybe save it for September, October when it gets a bit spooky. Then I realised what the word was for May. Couldn't get the book I actually wanted to read for it, so perfect. I am really intrigued by this book. So it's like, I don't know if you've heard, but like the urban myth, urban legend, or the horror story of The Last House on the Left, which is kind of like that house on the left. Something creepy is going on in that house. This book tweaks that a little bit. I'll read you the blurb like normal so you'll get what I mean, hopefully. You won't believe what's inside the last house on Needless Street. This is a story of a murderer, a stolen child, revenge. This is a story of Ted, who lives with his daughter Lauren and his cat Olivia in an ordinary house at the end of an ordinary street. All these things are true, and yet some of them are lies. You think you know what's inside the last house on Needless Street. You think you've read this story before. In the dark forest at the end of Needless Street, something lies buried, but it's not what you think. So I'm thinking a thriller / horror type book. Thrillers are my vibe, my go-to genre, so I am definitely looking forward to starting this book. And for the Read Your Bookshelf Readathon, the theme for this month is a book you should have read in high school. Now, in secondary schools in the UK, when it comes to GCSEs, there is like 2 sets of books you read. You always read a Shakespeare book, and then you read a play, and then you read another book to go with it all. I'm nearly 28, I've forgotten my GCSEs apart from the fact that we read Romeo and Juliet because that's what everyone wanted to read. But the book I have chosen for this is the book that the other set read, and it's quite short, I didn't realise, and that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. There are 120 pages in this book. I'm not going to say I hope to read it all in one day, because I said that for March for one of my books and it took me 3 days. So despite the fact it's a very short book, it's got quite a substantial blurb, I'll say. Streetwise George and his big childlike friend Lenny are drifters, searching for work in the fields and valleys of California. They have nothing except the clothes on their back and a hope that one day they'll find a place of their own and live the American dream. But dreams come at a price. Gentle giant Lenny doesn't know his own strength. And when they find work at a ranch, he gets into trouble with the boss's daughter-in-law. Trouble so bad that even his protector George may not be able to save him. I'm pretty sure I know what happens in this book. I'm pretty sure I remember friends telling me what happened in this book. So I'm being optimistic that I can read this one day. Not making any promises because I don't want to make promises because that didn't work for me last time. But a short book, so should be doable within a short amount of time. Come to the vlog when I read this book and it turns out I take a week. Now on to my sequels books, and the first book is The Whole Truth by Kara Hunter. This is book number 5 in the D.I. Adam Fawley series. I love this series. I think if you are wanting to read crime/thriller books, this is definitely a good series to start with. If you are wanting to read this series, the first book is close to home, and I would recommend this series to anyone and everyone. With this being book number 5 and having lots of characters in D.I. Fawley's team added each book, there is a nice little summary of the key members of his team. That doesn't include his personal family. I adore Kara's work. This series is actually being turned into a TV show, which I can't wait to read. There is actually a D.I. Fawley Twitter page, if I remember correctly, and because he is an officer in Oxford, they kind of retweet Oxford news and make little comments and like, not nasty, but like little jokes like you'd think it was actually him, and they make me giggle. But this is a series where you can read it as a standalone. It's just the side plots might be a bit confusing, but because of that, I can read you the blurb quite gladly without spoiling anything. She has everything at stake. He has everything to lose, but one of them is lying all the same. When an Oxford student accuses one of the university's professors of sexual assault, D.I. Adam Fawley's team think they've heard it all before, but they couldn't be more wrong. Because this time, the predator is a woman and the shining star of the department, and the student a 6-foot male rugby player. Soon, Fawley and his team are up against the clock to figure out the truth. What they don't realise is that someone is watching, and they have a plan to put Fawley out of action for good. That is also a running theme, is that in every book someone's trying to get D.I. Fawley. Now, you may think that's repetitive, it must get boring. No, because the reasons they come for him and the way they try, they make me giggle half the time. But that's part of the fun, trying to think, who's coming after him, why, and what elaborate plan are they going to try and trap him in? The next book I want to read is The Spider Dance by Nick Setchfield, and this is the sequel-ish of The War in the Dark by Nick Setchfield. I say sequel-ish because I don't think it's a direct sequel, but it should be read after The War in the Dark. A little bit like The Whole Truth, I can read you this blurb. There are some minor spoilers from the first book, but nothing so glaringly obvious that it puts you off reading this book. How to describe this duology? Odd. It's kind of like a crime thriller book, but with a little bit of supernatural in it, but not a supernatural in terms of, oh, this is so unbelievable and that it doesn't make sense. As in, it's supernatural enough that even obviously though half of things don't exist, you could sit there and think, that would work. Let me get into the blurb because I'm confusing myself here. The true Cold War is fought on the borders of this world, at the edges of the light. It's 1965 and Christopher Winter is trying to carve a new life, a new identity beyond his days in British intelligence. Recruited by London's gangland, he now finds himself on the wrong side of the law and about to discover that the Secret Service has a way of claiming back its own. Who is a fatally alluring succubus working honey traps for foreign paymasters? What is the true secret of the Shadowless, a fabled criminal cabal deadlier than the mafia? And why do both parties covet long-buried caskets said to hold the hearts of kings? Winter must confront the buried knowledge of his own past to survive, but is he ready to embrace the magic that created the darkness waiting there? So that's where the connection to book number 1 comes in. He's dealing with the consequences of what happened in this book. And I remember reading this book, getting really confused and thinking, I'm not going to enjoy it if I continue reading. It turned out to be a 4-star book. So even though I was a little confused, I still really liked it, which is why I wanted to read this. But while I wanted to read this, I didn't want to read it enough to put it in my 1 month TBR. So when I decided to do a second sequel month, it was like one of the first 2 books on my list. The next 2 books I want to read are Dead Man's Blues and The Monster's Lament by Ray Celestin. These are the second and third books of the Axeman's Jazz, and it's called the Blues Quartet series, I believe. There will be a 4th book in this series, however there is no release date as of yet, so I have time to read these 2, but let's be honest, I'm going to read them in the next month. Reading the blurbs, they do spoil what happens in the Axeman's Jazz. Well, not spoil, but they spoil what happens at the end. It's weird because there's so because they kind of spoil this, I can't read you the blurbs, and I'll be honest, I can't remember which one's number 2. I think it's Dead Man's Blues. I have it written down, don't worry. But that means I will read you the blurb for the Axeman's Jazz. So, the Axeman's Jazz blurb reads as follows. New Orleans, 1919. As a dark serial killer, the Axeman stalks a city. 3 individuals set out to unmask him. Detective Lieutenant Michael Talbot, heading up the official investigation, is struggling to find leads and harbouring his own grave secret. Former Detective Luca DeAndrea finds himself working for the Mafia, whose need to solve the mystery of the Axeman is every bit as urgent as that of the authorities. And Ida, a secretary of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, stumbles across a clue which lures her and her musician friend, Louis Armstrong, to the case and into terrible danger. As Michael, Luca and Ida each draw closer to discovering the killer's identity, the Axeman himself will issue a challenge to the people of New Orleans. Play jazz or risk becoming the next victim. Now, if you weren't aware, the Axeman was a serial killer in New Orleans in 1919. So there is some facts in the killings in this, which I liked, and the conclusion of this book was very intriguing, so I am quite looking forward to carrying on this series. The next 2 books I want to read are Smoke and Ashes and Death in the East by Abir Mukherjee, and these are books 3 and 4 in the Sam Wyndham series. I keep forgetting his last name. I read book number 2 last year, and book number 1, A Rising Man, is in my boxes ready to go in the cupboard when we've done it. I can read you the blurbs for Smoke and Ashes, which is book number 3, because they don't spoil anything. But I will give you a quick overview before I read the blurb. So Sam Wyndham is a police detective, if I remember correctly, based in India in the 1920s, and he solves crimes there working with his sergeant friend, Sergeant Banjari. However, Wyndham was a bit of a naughty boy, and instead of learning Banerjee's name, calls him Sergeant Surrender Not. So, but I have to say, while that sounds really bad, it kind of does work with Sergeant Banerjee's character, because he doesn't give up, and he works with this Englishman, and it works. It's kind of a crime partnership that works, and I really enjoy it. So, and I have to say, these are the two books I definitely want you to read this month, because book number 5 comes out end of June, beginning of July. Reading the first line, he's not a detective, he's a captain. India, 1921. Captain Sam Wyndham is battling a serious addiction to opium that he must keep secret from his superiors in the Calcutta police force. But Wyndham finds himself in a tight spot when he stumbles across a corpse in an opium den. When he then comes across a second body bearing the same injuries, Wyndham is convinced that there's a deranged killer on the loose. However, revealing his presence in the opium den could cost him his career. As Wyndham and Sergeant Surrender Not Banerjee set out to solve the two murders, Wyndham must tread carefully, keeping his personal demons secret before somebody else turns up dead. And book number 4, Death in the East, delves into Wyndham's backstory a little bit, but I won't read you the blurb for this one, because looking at this, it does spoil some of this, so I will keep that spoiler free. And the last 2 sequels I plan to read are A Gathering of Shadows and A Conjuring of Light. These are books 2 and 3 in the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. I want to call her Victoria, but that's the name she goes by when she writes her middle grade. Silly Michelle. I'm going to put these down because they're quite big. The third book is 666 pages. To be honest, I can't remember a lot of what happens in this book, so before I read books 2 and 3, I will most likely have to try and find cliff notes. So let's read the blurb and see if it jogs anything in my memory. Kel is one of the last travellers, magicians with a rare ability to travel between parallel universes, connected by one magical city. There's Grey London without magic and ruled by the mad King George III. Red London, where magic is revered and where Kel was raised alongside the heir to the Empire. White London, where people fight to control the remaining magic and magic fights back. And once there was a Black London. That has not triggered everything. I know there is a female companion. I think she's called Lila. I don't think she has magic. So yes, cliff notes will be needed. So while this stack behind me is my official TBR for May, there are a couple more books I would love to read during this month. Now this month in May, at the end of May, the last week, Ashley at A Frolic Through Fiction is doing a readathon called Do the Thingathon. Basically, it's a week just for you to do one of your reading goals. One of my reading goals from the start of the year is to read every book I carried over from 2020. I have a plan to read every book each month, bar one. A Declaration of the Rights of Magicians by H.G. Parry. If I manage to read all 10 books, or I only have like one left, the last week in May I will try to read this book. I have tried to fit it in with my other readathons. It's not. I have thought maybe I will leave it until October, November because it's got magicians. I think I tried to do that last year and I didn't manage to read it. And I don't want to unhaul this book at the end of the year not being read, because that's the thing. If I don't read every book from 2020 that I carried over, I have to unhaul them the first day of January 2022. So I want to read this book. It is a big book. It's 530 pages in this book and it's the first book in a series. So I want to read this and see if I like it. To carry on with it, it's magic. I hope I would like it. But do I read you the blurb in case I do read it? I'm not going to read you the blurb because I might not read it. But if I do manage to read this in that week, and I still have time remaining because I've read all the books behind me, so we'll include that book there. I also want to read The Shadow in the Glass by J.J.A. Harwood, and this is a Cinderella retelling. Now, this is the Goldsboro edition. Lovely stencils, but a bit like a declaration. I don't want to read you the blurb in case I don't get around to reading it. So technically, these two, not in the official TBR, but I would like them to be in the official TBR. So with that being said, this is my official TBR for May. Page-wise, to get through all these books, I need to read about 137 pages a day. That is very doable. Will I do it? Let's see. Jade is hosting her 48-hour readathon this weekend. Yes, it's the 1st of May and I am filming. So I am hoping to read a couple of books this weekend. I'm still not sure which books yet. I did think to read these two. Can't see my fingers. These two. But I am thinking of changing my mind that they're going to fall. So yeah, this is my TBR. This is my TBR video. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you would like to talk to me, please comment down below or come follow me on Instagram, Twitter or Goodreads. I will leave all the links down below. I will also leave a link to Ashley's channel and to Jade's channel. If you are new to my channel, hi, my name's Michelle. I'm normally not this flustered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and hopefully my next few videos will make you want to stay subscribed. But until next time, bye guys.